Of course, Constantine was much too short, but in his own way he was handsome, with light brown hair and dark blue eyes and a lively, challenging expression. He could almost have been an American. He was so tan and had such good teeth, but I could still tell straight away that he wasn't. He had what no American man I've ever met has had, and that's intuition. From the start, Constantine guessed I wasn't any prodigy of Mrs. Willard's. I raised an eyebrow here and dropped a dry little laugh there, and pretty soon we were both openly ranking Mrs. Willard over the colts, and I thought, this Constantine won't mind if I'm too tall and I don't know enough languages and haven't been to Europe. He'll see through all that stuff to what I really am. Constantine drove me to the UN in his old green convertible with cracked, comfortable brown leather seats and the top down. He told me his son came from playing tennis, and when we were sitting there side by side, flying down the streets in the open sun, he took my hand and squeezed it, and I felt happier than I had ever been since I was about 9 and running along the hot white beaches with my father the summer before he died. And while Constantine and I sat in one of those hushed plush auditoriums in the UN, next to a stern, muscular Russian girl with no makeup, who was a simultaneous interpreter like Constantine, I thought how strange it had never occurred to me before that I was only purely happy until I was 9 years old. After that, in spite of the Girl Scouts and the piano lessons and the watercolor lessons and the dancing lessons and the sailing camp, all of which my mother screamed to give me, and college, with crowing in the mist before breakfast and the black bottom pies and the little new firecrackers of ideas going off every day, I had never been really happy again. I stared through the Russian girl in her double-breasted gray suit, rattling off idiom after idiom in her own unknowable tongue, which Constantine said was the most difficult part, because the Russians didn't have the same idioms as our idioms. And I wished with all my heart I could crawl into her and spend the rest of my life barking out one idiom after another. It mightn't make me any happier, but it would be one more little pebble of efficiency among all the other pebbles. Then Constantine and the Russian girl interpreter and the whole bunch of black and white and yellow men arguing down there behind their labeled microphones seemed to move off at a distance. I saw their mouths going up and down without a sound, as if they were sitting on the deck of a departing ship, stranding me in the middle of a huge silence. I started adding up all the things that I couldn't do. I began with cooking. My grandmother and my mother were such good cooks that I left everything to them. They were always trying to teach me one dish or another, but I would just look on and say, yes, yes, I see, while the instructions slid through my head like water, and then I'd always spoil what I did so nobody would ask me to do it again. I remember Jody, my best and only girlfriend at college in my freshman year, making me scrambled eggs at her house one morning. They tasted unusual, and then I asked her if she had put anything extra. She said cheese and garlic salt. I asked who told her to do that, and she said nobody. She just thought it up. But then, she was practical and a sociology major. I didn't know shorthand either. This meant I couldn't get a good job after college. My mother kept telling me nobody wanted a plain English major, but an English major who knew shorthand was something else again. Everybody would want her. She would be in demand among all the up-and-coming young men, and she would transcribe letter after thrilling letter. The trouble was, I hated the idea of serving men in any way. I wanted to dedicate my own thrilling letters. Besides, those little shorthand symbols in the book my mother showed me seemed just as bad as let T equal time and let S equal the total distance. My list grew longer. I was a terrible dancer. I couldn't carry a tune. I had no sense of balance. And when we had to walk down a narrow board with our hands out and a book on our heads in gym class, I always fell over. I couldn't ride a horse or ski, the two things I wanted to do most because they cost too much money. I couldn't speak German or read Hebrew or write Chinese. I didn't even know where most of the out-of-the-way countries the UN men in front of me represented fitted in on the map. For the first time in my life, sitting there in the soundproof heart of the UN building between Constantine, who would play tennis as well as simultaneously interpret, and the Russian girl who knew so many idioms, I felt dreadfully inadequate. The trouble was, I had been inadequate all along. I simply hadn't thought about it. The one thing I was good at was winning scholarships and prizes, and that era was coming to an end. I felt like a racehorse in a world without racetracks, or a champion college footballer suddenly confronted by Wall Street and a business suit. His day of glory shrunk to a little gold cup on his mantle, with a date engraved on it like the date on a tombstone. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was Iggy, the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attilia, and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic lady-crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of these figs I could choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. Constantine's restaurant smelled of herbs and species and sour cream. All the time I had been in New York, I've never found such a restaurant. I only found those heavenly hamburgers places where they serve giant hamburgers and a soup of the day and 4 kinds of fancy cake at a very clean counter facing a long gallery mirror.